So you've been in charge of the jails in Wayne County for how long now?
4 years now.
And you know, there's a lot of stuff in the news about the Epstein case. Have you been following that?
So I don't follow that news much, but obviously it's so much out there you can't avoid it.
I'm with you. You know, I read some articles this morning, and I've been watching it. I think it's kind of interesting because there's podcasters out there like the Joe Rogans of the world who I'm a fan of, who thinks that he was murdered in that federal prison in New York City. The autopsy and other people who work for the prison system and think that he hung himself and he committed suicide.
Correct.
So there is that debate that we're going to get into. And at the end, I'm going to ask you your opinion, and we're going to talk about that. But let's break it down a little bit about, you know, when you have somebody in your custody, and about the security, and about suicide watch, and about cameras, and about staffing. I want to get into all of that with you.
And one other interesting thing with Epstein and people that you guys have in custody is that a lot of this is the motive behind the idea of killing Epstein that makes it so that
salacious,
this guy supposedly has a bunch of videotapes of other people that maybe were doing things wrong, and so maybe people want him dead. And like in Wayne County, there's plenty of, probably every day, there's people who may want inmates dead so that they don't testify against them or for other reasons.
And that's correct. And I think probably the difference here is, you know, all the high-profile politicians that, you know, are identified as being associates at one point of Epstein.
It's a good point. I mean, you know, Kevin brought up a good point. You've had probably celebrities in your jails.
We have
high-profile people. Name a couple that you can think of.
So there's been quite a few. Certainly, unfortunately, our previous mayor, Mattie Maroon, person that, you know, owns the bridge, and there's been quite a few others.
So is there special treatment given when you have Kwame Kilpatrick or Mattie Maroon in your jail?
It's only special attention in the sense of these are individuals that you would never expect to be placed in a situation like this. And like any other inmate, that first 48 to 72 hours is the most critical time. The research shows that, you know, generally jail suicides and things like that occur within that first 48 to 72 hours. And so, you know, we would flag them and put them on a special watch. And in our jail, we would obviously put them in a location where they can be closely watched. And whereas our rounds are every 45 minutes on the hour, we would increase the watch to maybe every 30 minutes on the hour. And in some cases, depending on the behavior and activity of the individual, we would have them under constant watch, every 15 minutes or continuous watch, where it's uninterrupted. Someone like Epstein, I certainly believe that, you know, throughout his stay, he should have been on a suicide watch throughout the stay. I understand at some point he was removed from suicide watch, and he had not gone to trial yet, which to me didn't make a whole lot of sense. We have the individual that's just recently shot the Detroit police officer. I would expect that he's probably going to get to our jail today. I saw the press conference yesterday. That individual is going to be put under suicide watch because we want to make sure that he has no opportunity to harm himself while he's in our jail.
And do you have cameras on your jails, or cameras in the hallways, or cameras that actually show the inmate? I'm sure it's different everywhere.
Well, as you know, we're building a new jail in Wayne County, and right now we don't have as many cameras as we'd like to have. And so there are some areas we have cameras, and unfortunately there are some areas we don't.
They say in this Epstein case, the two cameras that were facing the jail where he was, or, you know, where he was, the cell where he was, malfunctioned that day, which makes people go crazy. Well, but do cameras malfunction on a regular basis, or the cameras you have, or
cameras are like any other technology. There is a possibility that the cameras can malfunction. So, of course, that's something that the people there in New York will have to explain.
But wait, hold on. How rare is that? let's because we have cameras all over these offices, and I have a crack IT staff here, and they tell me that they don't go down. So in this day and age, how often are you looking for a tape and you find, oh crap, it went down and it didn't record what I wanted to record? How often does that happen?
Well, let me say this, Mike. Unfortunately, sometime in government, we don't have the quality and type of equipment that you have here in this
I understand,
office. And
but
because of the quality and type of equipment that government can afford, there is sometimes challenges. And
The cameras are older than you are.
well, you got old equipment.
absolutely.
But
You ever heard
how
of
often?
Pelco?
No.
Yeah, see?
That's
how
old.
some
That's
of those
some
cameras
old
are.
stuff. But how often? I mean, how is it? Weekly, monthly, yearly that you go to look for a tape and it's gone, or it's corroded, or it's malfunctioned? I just need a sense because
So it's different by agency. We require that our supervisors do a random review weekly. But when they're doing a random review, they're not looking at the entire system. They might be looking randomly at 2 or 3 housing units on a given day. And unless you have someone that is constantly sitting there watching every camera, it's hard to say that, that was something that could have been avoided. There is a possibility that, the cameras may have malfunctioned on that day. Now, you would think, given the gravity of the situation with Epstein, that those things would have been checked off prior to putting them in that location. And so,
wait. So that's an interesting point that I was thinking of. Like, this is probably as high of a profile person as that jail system. Now they've had some big names in
Sure.
there. Okay, I've read the names. There's some big names, but this guy allegedly tried committing suicide 6 days before he actually committed suicide or was murdered.
According to the
You'd
reports.
think they would make sure that the best cameras they had in the jail were either moved, checked, buy some new ones. Cameras these days are not that expensive. I mean, you could put
True.
a cheap cell phone in there,
True.
constantly videotaping the guy or something, a
True.
camcorder. I don't know what. You would have figured it out. I mean, some of the story is a little bit crazy that it malfunctioned.
And the 2 guards who were supposed to check every 30
We're
minutes.
not there yet, Kevin. We're not
Jeez.
there yet. But
I was
right.
gonna go there.
No, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
so okay. So so you're saying sometimes it does malfunction. So okay. So talk to me about Suicide Watch. Let's break that down. So you said in the first 48 to 72 hours, do you know how many suicides you have a year in your custody?
Well, fortunately, thank God, the last 2 years we have not had any. But there was a time where we had our challenges. I think in 2015 we had more than our share. In 2015,
How many?
about 4 or 5,
And
in
out of
that
those-
year alone.
And out of those 4 or 5, how many occurred in the first 72 hours?
You know what? Unfortunately, I cannot give you that information. Probably only about 1 or 2
Okay.
in this first.
But you mentioned that that's a critical time to
Correct.
assess people and watch people.
Correct.
And then there's always a risk of suicide.
Yes.
And so is suicide, I mean, they do it through the sheets? Is that how they do it?
Sheets. There's various ways they do it. Sheets, towels. And it's mostly through the sheets. And so we've recently in our jail, in our mental health ward, we've taken all the sheets and we've given them blankets because it's harder to tie a blanket into a knot, a ligature, than a sheet. But in a couple of our cases, we had inmates that jumped from the balcony and killed themselves.
Oh, in the second floor of the interior of the jail?
Yes, and
Down to the concrete floors.
Correct.
Interesting. Okay, there's not a hope. I mean, I guess there's things you could do to stop that, but if someone wants to take
Yeah.
their own life, they're going to find a way.
and that's generally it. And suicide, is the number one cause of death in jails. You have to remember these people have a lot of idle time, and we're not watching every individual every minute of the day, and so it only takes about 6-7 minutes to commit suicide. So if we have a watch where our rounds are every 30 minutes, that's at least 2 or 3 opportunities that an individual, after the officer goes by, could actually take themselves out. And so in the case with Epstein, I do think there were some warnings. as you indicated, the previous attempt to take his life, those things are going to have to be explained. How come after this first attempt, you didn't confirm that the location that you put him in, everything was working, and you increased the rounds on that housing unit?
And he was in a special housing unit. It's my understanding. He was moved. Do you have a special housing unit in Wayne County?
We do. We have a couple of special housing
So what does
units.
that mean? What does that consist of? Who would go in those units?
So in Wayne County, if a person doesn't report any signs of potential suicide hazard, we put them in a general housing space based on their classification level. But if any person comes in and there's certain things that they can say, which I won't say on this podcast, they'll get flagged, and right away we'll move them to the mental health floor. And so in Wayne County, we have the largest inpatient mental health facility in the state. And why do I say that? We have 120 beds dedicated to folks with mental health issues. And anyone that is reporting signs of potential suicide, they would be flagged by the mental health staff for evaluation.
And there's more eyes on the people in the special housing unit?
Yes, there's more eyes because in addition to the floor security staff, you have the nursing staff, you have the psychosocial workers, and there's just a whole lot more activity on those floors and those units than any other floor.
And is that the unit that Kilpatrick went to?
No, so Kilpatrick, after a while, he was put in our segregation unit. He was put in a space where the officers were right outside the door. And so, because again, some people don't have the issue of suicide, but just the fact that, someone else might want to harm them. So you want to separate them from the rest of the population, like we do police officers that, come in our custody. We don't mix them with the general population. We separate them for their own safety.
Now, you were the chief back when Kwame was in your custody?
I was the assistant. Well, no, not in the Wayne County jail.
Okay.
I was the assistant chief on the Detroit side when he was in Wayne County.
Got it. And do you know if they were worried that he was going to commit suicide?
I'm sure, their concern was to watch him, for that first 48 to 72 hours. And then once they got beyond that point, just watching him for his own safety.